There we are. Tick-tock, time to rock. I'll give you all one guess as to who caused us to be 15 minutes late.
It's not the man that doesn't know how to fix his chair.
That was before. We were still on time. It's the man. It's the man who can't remember his password to anything. All right. Well, let's go ahead and test everything here because was having mic problems earlier. Guys, do you hear us clearly? I was getting some weird feedback from the mic. Just tell us everything is working, and then we're going to get started. Check, 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 check. Oh, someone said D-Wood no sound. I don't believe that. I think that's someone who's messing around. Guys, do we have sound? Just wanted to verify. Okay. Everything's saying sound is good, which means that Snoopsin100 is a troll. Probably the same person who always says there are sound problems in order to distract me. And hide user on this channel. It's easy. It's always a click away, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Don't do that again. All right. Ladies. All right. We're getting verification that we have sound. All right. So we're going to talk about Allah not being all wise, not being all powerful, not being unchanging. And these would be claims that Islam makes over and over again in the Quran. He's all wise, he's all powerful, and so on. But Anthony's going to give you just one argument. There are a bunch. You could give a bunch of these arguments. He's going to give you an argument based on one little passage of the Quran. And it's going to show how Muslims have some problems here. But Anthony, why don't you introduce yourself for everyone in case anyone here is new.
Yeah, so my name's Anthony Rogers. I have been engaging Muslims for over 2 decades at least. I was converted like David in jail, and I was surrounded by Muslims. I was an 18-year-old kid. So I took an interest in Islam from the day of my conversion because I was interested in reaching out to Muslims, among others. And so in that capacity, I've written for Answering Islam for at least a decade. I've written with you on your blog for almost as long. And for the past 2 or 3 years, I've done videos on your channel. So that's me, and I put up with David. So you know that I've got to have an iron backbone.
Yeah, and you have an interesting personality in that people who normally get mad at everyone don't get mad at you, right? You and John McCrae are the only people I know who are like that. Like me and Sam will flip out on anyone if we're around that person for long enough. Vocab will flip out on Vocab. Vocab will eventually start whining and crying about things, and he'll flip out on people, and people flip out on him and stuff like that. But no one ever gets mad at Anthony or John McCrae.
Yeah, now John would have to give the breakdown. As you know, John.
Oh yeah. He'll break down the personality type.
John is an expert when it comes to analyzing certain personality types. But my claim to fame is that Sam has never been mad at me. And if you know Sam, you know that's almost a miracle. Yeah. So, Sam will be the first to tell you that it doesn't take much for him to get upset with you. So the fact that, Sam and I have never had any kind of, issue.
Lindy Z said, someone in chat mentioned Chris Hansen. You should definitely do a skit where you are Chris Hansen confronting Muhammad. That's already in the works. That's just the only thing stopping that right now is coronavirus. But yeah, it's going to be called To Catch a Prophet. It's going to be called To Catch a Prophet. And it's going to be Muhammad. Muhammad comes over because he thinks he's, found a prepubescent girl who's willing to marry him or sign up for Muta. And it's, of course, Chris Hansen. But the joke's going to be that Muhammad's too dumb to figure out that there's not really a girl, right? So Chris Hansen's going to explain it to him. And Muhammad thinks that Chris Hansen is just hiding the girl. And so, the police will take him off, they'll arrest him, then he'll get out and he'll come back to the house, and he keeps coming back to the house and so on. So anyway, that's going to be the joke. But yeah, it's going to be To Catch a Prophet with David Wood as Chris Hansen. All right, now should we go ahead and get started? We will take. Hey, that's an interesting one. Do John of Damascus meets Muhammad with Al D? Who's Al D? Oh, maybe meant Al Fadi. I don't know. As John of Damascus, that would be a good one. All right. So, Viking Apache said, Anthony, do you get mad at Muhammad? Yeah, that's weird. Do you get mad? Do you get ticked off? Well, like I will. The world can be crashing down around me. I can have people stomping on me, kicking my head. I'm totally calm. But I will lose my pen and not be able to find it, and I'll flip out and be ready to smash everything in sight. So it's like little things, they tick me off. Big things, I'm totally calm. Do you get ticked off and mad, or?
I can get animated, but I don't typically get mad. I often tell people when it comes to my wife and I, you and Marie have a perfect, interaction with each other. If anybody hasn't seen David and Marie interact, it's perfect, but they're not the same personality type, right? Well, my wife, if a tree fell into our house and there was a big hole in it, my wife would be immediately in, damage control mode, what are we supposed to do, that sort of thing. I'd be over there thinking, great, now we've got more sunlight. Or, we've got a sunroof in our house, or, something along those lines. There's not much that gets me down. So typically when I see, so for example, I was riding up and David dropped a video and I was just laughing hilariously in the car on the way up. At the same time, what David was talking about was horrendous and repugnant, right? So, I have natural revulsion to what I see in Muhammad's character and behavior. And there's a sense in which I am incensed at what he said and taught and the fact that people imitate his practice, but not, it's not like, I'm not in a rage in that sense. My thought is more, expose Muhammad more because of it than it is to just sort of, but I don't get upset too much at anything.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys. Well, Anthony's argument here will not take up a terribly long amount of time, even with me jumping in and adding my thoughts. So we will be taking some questions along the way. People keep giving me suggestions. You didn't hear on our last live stream with me and Vocab and John McCrae where you hear that we were planning a horror movie? We're gonna have a.
No, I didn't see that one.
Yeah, we're going to have a horror movie inside a cave, but it's going to be like an hour and a half full horror movie, but it's about Muhammad receiving his first revelations.
Yeah, I can already see where that's going. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be it's going to be pretty graphically violent and bloody. All right.
Okay. So I would start off with this. The argument can be made quickly, but I want to make sure that people are going into this remembering several things. One of the first things that people should remember is Muhammad's initial interest or attraction to Judaism and Christianity. Right? Muhammad was a dyed-in-the-wool pagan. He was a product of pagan parents. He grew up in a pagan tribe that was part of a broader, network of pagan worship. The caravan trade that came into Mecca involved the worship of multiple deities, and Allah was only one of many. But the point is that in that context, if anybody hasn't heard a Jewish person really ridicule and lampoon idolatry, you really haven't heard anything when it comes to just cutting idolatry off at the knees. And the origin of this, of course, is in the Old Testament prophets. You look at the prophets and you have Isaiah talking about an idolater cutting down a tree.
It's one of the coolest passages in the Bible.
And then he talks about, it's just, it's...
He makes a fire and bakes some bread on it. And then he takes the other part and he bows down and worships it.
Yeah, but so half of it he uses to make a fire. So the same material that he's constructing a god out of is fuel for the fire. The other half, after he makes it into a god, he bows down to it and says, "You made me," right? So you just see the foolishness of it. And that sort of thing is found throughout the prophets, and it was imitated by the Jews. If you look in the Talmud or other rabbinic literature, you just find this scathing rebuke of idolatry. And this is the context then in which Muhammad is living and moving and having his being in Mecca. the pagans are engaging in ridiculous idolatry, and the Jews are constantly making fun of it. And even though they're in a minority, they're still getting the upper hand when it comes to the rhetoric, the rhetorical battle, right? And so, that's one factor weighing on Muhammad. Another thing is that the Jews and the Christians have a concrete revelation from God. They don't just have these traditions from the murky past that nobody knows for sure where they came from and what basis they have. And they're also not sufficiently detailed. They just lack all sorts of things that a person who has a revelation has. Mm-hmm. And so this becomes very attractive to Muhammad. And the Jews, as well as the Christians, believed in prophets who were authoritative spokesmen. And the Jews in particular were still waiting for someone. In fact, they would constantly bring this up in their battles with the Jews and say that, he's going to come and then he's going to aid us against you. He's going to help us overthrow your dominance over us. And so all this is happening, and eventually Muhammad gets the idea. We don't need to go over all of that, right? He gets the idea that he's a prophet, and in fact he's that prophet that they were expecting, the Jews. And so there was a lot about the religion of the Jews that appealed to him, but there was also stuff that he didn't like. Of course, he couldn't agree with the ethnic aspect of it, right? He's an Arab, so there's going to be the idea that he could become a Jew. Just that wasn't something that he could hurdle. So he wanted something especially adapted to his own Arab situation. And so, of course, he claimed that he is the prophet for the Arabs. He's getting revelation in Arabic, and he's sent then in particular to his people. That meant that Muhammad then wanted to pattern his deity after the God of Jews and Christians, which means that his God has to be almighty, all-knowing, and unchanging, among other things. There's, of course, a whole host of attributes that would have to be true of him. So you do find in the Quran claims, right? You have the claim that Allah is all of those things. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways the Quran expresses this is one that Muslims love to bring up for various reasons, but it's the expression kun fayakun. That means be and it is, and the idea is that all Allah has to do is say be, and whatever he says be in reference to happens. So if Allah wants to create a gnat, all he has to do is say be. If he wants to create a solar system, all he has to do is say be. If he wants to create a universe, all he has to do is say be, which means
it's all equally easy for him.
Everything is equally easy for Allah. There's nothing harder than another thing. Mm-hmm. Now,
one second there. We've got the Islam critiqued troll, Colin, coming in here talking trash. He says, you think you're the best at pointing out problems with Muhammad's morality? Mm-hmm. I just finished a script that will give you a run for your money. Challenge accepted? Well, Colin, you have to get the challenge right. I didn't say I'm the best at pointing out problems, right? Christian Prince is phenomenal at pointing out problems. Sam Shamoon is phenomenal at pointing out problems. I said I'm the best at mocking. I'm the best mocker. So if you're mocking it better, I'm looking forward to the day when someone can out mock me, because that Islam's really through then. What?
No, I'm laughing because I like Islam critique style.
It's awesome, yeah.
He has a good dry wit, and I like that.
Yeah, and the stuff, I like it because the stuff he's putting out is stuff other people aren't putting out, right?
Yeah.
Like it's easy to come along and put out the same stuff that everyone, that's like you, right? You're putting out stuff that other people aren't putting out there.
Yeah, but I recognize that David is the master mocker, which is why sometimes I have this brilliant idea, and I think I got to give this to David because he's going to use it better than I would.
He'll do that. So, he'll say, hey, I've got this awesome idea for a video, but you should do it because.
Yeah, I mean, I
can just be much more savage.
Yeah, yeah. So, I can detect certain problems, but some things deserve a certain touch. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, Islam critique challenge accepted. And by the way, you can come on live if you want to discuss it after you post it. We could even play clips of it and discuss it and see where you're going. And Child of Jesus Christ says, Sir David, I've shared your video to my Muslim teacher in Malaysia, and she told me she will check whether you are correct or not. Spoiler alert, I am correct. If she doesn't notice that, then tell her to check that again. All right, Anthony.
Okay, so that was the setup. So what I'm driving at won't be surprising to people. Muhammad at heart is a pagan, but he's claiming that he's a prophet of the God of the Jews and Christians. He is a inspired individual. His revelations have their origin with Allah, which means then that they're going to be free of the stain of paganism. Any kind of paganism that otherwise affected Muhammad would be overcome by virtue of the fact that the origin of his revelations are from Allah, not at all from himself. And of course, the Islamic sources claim that Muhammad was purified, right? One of the tall tales in Muhammad's youth is that he had some episode where he was thrown down to the ground, which was later interpreted as his heart being, his chest being split open.
But how did they interpret it then?
Yeah. They thought that it was a sign of demonic possession, and apparently Muhammad also, that was his view because it was his most natural interpretation of other experiences that he had. Mm-hmm. Right, in particular his experience in the cave on Mount Hira. Mm-hmm. So, but that means that if Muhammad was a pagan at heart and he's not really receiving revelations, we might expect Muhammad to have some Freudian slips along the way, right?
Oh, he's got some.
While trying, it's sort of like when I got here, I got to the door and David opened the door and he said, "Oh, Tony, I'm mad to see you. I mean, I'm glad to see you," right? That would be a Freudian slip. Well,
we recorded we recorded Muhammad Meets Sigmund Freud with the apostate prophet as Sigmund Freud, and there were all kinds of Freudian slips out there. Everything Muhammad says is a Freudian slip about loving little girls or something like that.
Oh gosh,
that's classic. And Freud, we got Freud. He keeps snorting cocaine because he's getting more and more freaked out by the horrible things Muhammad is saying.
That makes me think you could do a Sherlock Holmes, because you mentioned cocaine. I was thinking
Muhammad meets Sherlock
Holmes. Remember, he did heroin.
Yeah.
He thought it was useful medicinally, but apparently didn't know its devastating effects. But
notice Shamunian here. Why is that loser Anthony in your house? Notice Sam can't just mind his own business. He has to come over here to everyone else's live stream, do a hit and run, because no one watches his, and he gets jealous and he wants his name mentioned so people can maybe go over and watch his live stream, which they're not, because his live streams aren't any good.
By the way, Sam, Dale Tuggy has some choice words to say about you on his terrible Facebook page.
But don't challenge him to debate, because he won't.
He'll run.
Lena says, I have binge-watched all videos on Act 17 apologetics. Crave more. Oh, well, I've been cranking out 1 or 2 a day, and there will be more tomorrow. Michael Lawler here said, what's with the kids' tea set mugs? I don't actually drink.
Espresso.
I don't drink cups of espresso. I will add them to a cup of coffee. So I'll have like a giant cup of coffee and then add some espresso shots to it. But I don't just drink these. But whenever Anthony's Italian, so whenever he comes here, then my wife makes espressos, and I'm not going to let them sitting there drinking espresso without me having one.
I come up here for 2 reasons, maybe 3. The first reason is an espresso, and I usually get 2 or 3.
Yeah,
every couple hours. The second reason is Kepler, their youngest child.
Yeah, he's pretty funny.
Yeah.
And other than that, we record a bunch of crap.
Yeah. That's the possible third reason.
Yeah, so so if anyone's wondering, Sam's wondering what Anthony's doing here. Unlike Sam Shamoon, Anthony is going to be recording a bunch of videos on some groundbreaking stuff. All right, before you were rudely interrupted by Sam Shamoon.
Okay, so I mentioned Freudian slips. Mm-hmm. That's one angle of...
Oh, I rudely interrupted you then because I started talking about the video. And then we went, okay, never mind.
I thought you knew. So that's one way of looking at what I'm about to talk about. Another way of looking at it is Muhammad, while claiming to be speaking for the same God who revealed himself to the prophets in the prophetic scriptures, taught things that were more in line with his pagan background, and then later had to be corrected on them by the Jews. And you actually find this all throughout the Islamic sources. A lot of the present beliefs that Muslims hold were not the original beliefs of Muhammad or his companions. And that's because, not because Allah came along and said, Muhammad, this is wrong, you need to change this. The fact of the matter is, it was usually the Jews who were the catalyst for Muhammad's new insight.
Yeah, you see this a lot in the Hadith. So guys, just to be clear here, right? Muhammad's teaching his companions something. They're all going around doing what Muhammad taught. And then the Jews come along and say, what are you doing? You don't know how pagan that is? And then Muhammad yeah, here's the way we do it now. And it'll be exactly what the Jews told him to do.
Yeah.
Right?
So the order is not Allah revealing things to Muhammad and then making it known to his companions and the Jews and others in Arabia. The order is the Jews, Muhammad, and then Allah. So look, notice who's in last place. The Jews are always one step ahead of Muhammad, 2 steps ahead of Allah. Allah's always the last to arrive on the scene and speak accurately, right? And he's basically walking in the footsteps of the Jews that were already, walked in by Muhammad before him. So here's an example of that. David's done a video, which I think is one of his best. Unfortunately, it was in the earlier days of his YouTube forays.
I was just getting a request. I mean, I get these requests pretty regularly, but just like, and maybe an hour or two before you got here, someone was saying, could you re-upload those other videos? Because people don't see them now. They don't get recommended now. And so could you re-upload those earlier videos? But I've actually been thinking about re-recording some of those earlier videos because I had a crap camera.
Right.
I had a crap mic. Everything was garbage. It's low resolution. Whereas now can record everything, re-record everything. So not for all the videos, but for maybe my 10, if I picked out my 10 or 15 favorite videos from years ago, like Who Killed Muhammad. That one's got some of these videos have over 1 million views and stuff like that. That one's got 1 point something million, stuff like that. But when I look at it, I'm like, the camera is horrible. The mic is horrible. There's all this background noise. And so, yeah, I think I could do a much more epic job today. So, yep, that's, but yeah, one of them that I would like to redo is Allah swearing by everything and committing shirk.
Yeah. So in that video, the main focus is on the fact that Allah, who's supposedly transcendent, absolute, the creator and maker of everything, he's swearing by created things. And if you're familiar with the previous scriptures, if you're familiar with the Old Testament and the New Testament, you know that God swears by himself because there's none greater by whom he can swear, and the lesser always swears by the greater. And so biblically, in terms of the monotheism taught by the prophets and the apostles, God can't swear by anything other than himself because there is nothing greater than him. Nothing to which he must appeal, nothing that can hold him to account except his own eternal being and nature. So that's what you see in the Bible. Well, Muhammad, before he knew this, but while claiming to be a prophet, has Allah swearing by himself over and over and over again in the Quran.
Allah swears by literally everything. There is nothing, you cannot name something that Allah did not swear by, right? So notice the reasoning here. According to Muhammad, after the Jews corrected him, according to Muhammad, if you swear by anything other than God, you have associated it as a partner with God. If you say, I swear by this, you're calling upon that thing. You're calling upon that thing to somehow be a kind of judge and enforcer over what you've said, right? So Muhammad eventually said, hey, Allah is the only one you should be appealing to that. He's the only one that can, hear this. He's the only one that can enforce it. He's the only, you don't be calling on all these other things. So if you swear by anything other than Allah, you're associating as a partner with Allah. And so the point of the video was, yes, in the Quran, Allah swears by everything. Allah's constantly, I swear by this, I swear by that, I swear by the pen, I swear by the stars, swear by the moon, swear by this, swear by that, swear by this. And there's even a passage where he says, I swear by the seen and the unseen. Well, guess what? There's only 2 categories of things, seen and unseen, right? So if he's swearing by both, everything that's seen and everything that's unseen, Allah has sworn by everything, and therefore, according to Muhammad, Allah has associated everything as a partner with himself, and Islam is thus not monotheistic, it's pantheistic. Like everything you see is God.
Yeah. So let me read the hadith just so people know that this comes from the Muslim sources. So this is from Sunan an-Nasai. It's from Volume 4, Book 35, number 3804. It says, it was narrated from Abdullah bin Yasar from Katela, a woman from Juhayna, that a Jew came to the Prophet and said, "You are setting up rivals to Allah and associating others with him. You say, whatever Allah wills, and you will, and you say, by the Kaaba."
So when you say buy something here, like buy the Kaaba, you're saying, I say it by the Kaaba. That's a way of swearing. You're swearing by the Kaaba.
Right. And so here's how it concludes. So the Prophet commanded them, meaning his companions, if they wanted to swear an oath, to say by the Lord of the Kaaba, and to say whatever Allah wills, then whatever you will. So there's actually two issues here. We're just focusing on the fact that it's the Jews that are the catalysts for this insight and subsequent command, a change of command from originally allowing the practice of swearing by created things, and all they're doing in this case is following Allah's bad example, right? But now the Jews, having corrected Muhammad, and remember, this is dealing with shirk. This isn't one of the minor sins. Muslims talk about major sins and minor sins. And it's not even one major sin among many. This is the worst sin according to the Quran. Surah 348, Surah 3116 both say that the sin of shirk, associating partners with Allah, is unforgivable. Well, here is a Jew correcting Muhammad, Allah's greatest prophet, who came to rid the world of shirk. Right? I mean, what need do we have of Muhammad if he has to be corrected by the Jews on this fundamental issue? I mean, this already unravels the entire, claim of Islam. But so this gives you an idea. Muhammad was in fact a pagan. He was not a prophet. He was not
Pagan
receiving. What's that?
That sounds like a cool video. Pagan at heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
I've also been planning to do something maybe here in the next couple days. I think you and I have talked about this before. I don't want to say, I'm not sure what to call it. Maybe replacement paganism, where Muhammad takes the paganism of his time, but he ends up giving them a replacement that's kind of the same thing. So, for instance, the birds, right?
Yeah, we talked about that.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you have the famous story of the Satanic verses, where Muhammad received a revelation that was part of the Quran, saying that you could pray to three pagan goddesses, Alat, Alus, and Manat, and these are called the exalted cranes, whose intercession is to be hoped for. So notice it's these three pagan bird goddesses, and the idea, if they're these bird goddesses, then they can fly back and forth between you and Allah, interceding for you that way, right? Now, every Muslim on the planet would immediately recognize that as absolute, indisputable paganism. Right? You've got all these intercessory birds flying in between you and Allah? What is this pagan nonsense, right? Every Muslim will recognize it until you show him that his prophet actually replaced it with a different kind of bird intercessors. Right? Muhammad said in the hadith that when you get down to the resurrection time, chapters of the Quran are going to appear as flocks of birds to intercede for you. So notice, before, every Muslim on the planet would recognize, hey, if you've got a bird goddess flying between you and Allah, interceding for you, that's absolute polytheistic pagan nonsense, right? But Muhammad makes it the Quran, and these individual chapters of the Quran are going to appear as flocks of birds who are going to intercede for you. So these flocks of birds are going to be flying in between you and Allah, telling Allah, oh, Allah, he did this and this and this and that, and so on. And so these flocks of birds now intercede for you. And suddenly, when you put it like that, a Muslim, nope, that's not paganism, it's just pure monotheism. Really. You've got all these birds flying around, and they're interceding with you. They're conscious. They have thoughts. They have memories. They're appealing to Allah on your behalf, just like Alat, Alus, and Manat did. But because they're the Quran doing it, it's no longer paganism, right? And Muslim, yep, it's not paganism. And so that's what I mean. Like, he takes every single thing the pagans believed in and he gives them an Islamic substitute. He gives them an Islamic substitute. And like everything, the black stone, himself as an intercessor, everything is substituting for something that the pagans had. And somehow Muhammad gives them the exact same thing, usually worse. I mean, you got 3 pagan goddesses, but now you've got, and he makes it's much worse, right? Now you've got entire flocks of birds that are interceding on your behalf. And so it's just complete replacement paganism. And so that's why Muhammad's doing this. And the Jews keep coming up to him and go, you have any clue what you're doing, dude? Do you have any idea what you're doing? And so anyway, things didn't go well for the Jews in that area who kept correcting him.
Yeah, so let's give him the verse. This is the verse. Now, I'm going to give it to you the way a lot of translations render it. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's the sort of thing, even if it's translated accurately, you could possibly miss it. Mm-hmm. Once you see it, you realize it's a huge problem. But it's the sort of thing you could just read right over it.
And to verify that, I've always read right over this.
Yeah,
I never stopped and thought, oh, here's a problem.
Yeah,
so until you pointed out, I never thought there was a problem here.
And it's the same sort of thing. I mean, anybody can, something else will catch your attention while you're reading it because there's a lot going on. It's the same thing in the Bible. You read through the Bible, you notice something a second time that you didn't notice the first time, and so forth. So this is just a product of reading and rereading, and also reading various translations, and then trying to figure out, when you notice that translations are different, what accounts for that difference. Is it just because there's more than one way to express this in English, and one translator is choosing a different term, or is there some deeper, more profound explanation? And in this case, you're about to find out why a lot of translations render it inaccurately. So I'm going to read, I'll read one, maybe there's some that David wants to read, but this is Shakir's translation. Uh-huh. Okay, so this is a standard translation of the Quran. This is Surah 30, verse 27. It says, "And he it is," talking about Allah, "who originates the creation, then reproduces it, and it's easy to him, and his are the most exalted attributes in the heavens and the earth, and he is the mighty, the wise." Now, contextually, what's going on here is Allah, supposedly, is answering the pagans who are mocking the idea of the resurrection. To them, this is an absurd notion. And so what Allah is supposedly doing here is giving them a logical reply. He's saying, in effect, I created things the first time, and so when I reproduce them, it's going to be easy for me, right? I did it before, and it's a piece of cake, right? That's the gist of it. And remember, I mean, the Islamic sources say Allah's almighty. In fact, this verse says at the end that Allah is the mighty, the wise. And the idea there is he's almighty, he's all wise. In fact, that's how some other translations render it. So here is a verse that addresses an act of Allah's power, and in the process also claims that he is all-powerful. But the problem is that's not what the verse actually says. Mm-hmm. The Arabic word that's used there for the word easy is ahwanu, and it means easier. And so here's what the verse is literally saying. This is, I'm using now the translation of Dr. Mustafa Khattab. So again, this is Surah 30, verse 27. This is the clear Quran, the so-called clear Quran, by the way. I don't know why he would choose to call it the clear Quran when the Quran is the most incredibly ambiguous book on the planet. But his translation, called the clear Quran, has it this way. He is the one who originates the creation, then will resurrect it, which is even easier for him. Mm-hmm. Now help me out here, David. I thought we already established that there's nothing harder for Allah than another thing. Everything is equally easy for him, because when he does something, all he has to do is say be. It's not any harder to say be in one case than to say be in another case. If Allah has absolute power, there's no resistance to his power. It's not as if he has to overcome some kind of resistance. If Allah is all powerful, then to even speak in terms of greater or lesser degrees of difficulty already is unintelligible, right?
So just to be clear here, ladies and gentlemen, the Quran is talking about two things: creation, right? Creation, and then the resurrection. And Allah says that the resurrection is going to be easier than the creation. Resurrecting everything is going to be easier than creating it in the first place. And I see, because I have a bunch of translations in front of me, I see a bunch of translations that translate it as easy or simple or most easy, but then I see a bunch which give the literal translation that it's actually easier.
Right.
It's easier for him to resurrect it than to create it. But so Anthony's pointing out, think about the implication there. All he has to do to create something is say be, and it pops into existence. And he's saying it's easier for him to resurrect something. And there it sounds like, well, I've already created everything. It's even easier for me to resurrect things. And so that almost makes it sound like, well, I've already, I've had some practice. Yeah. I've had some practice before, and so now I've learned, and now I can do it. But
Allah hit the gym.
Yeah. So if it's easier for him to resurrect than to create, then that means it was harder for him to create than it is to resurrect. So something is harder for him, and so
those are
some issues.
Those are comparative terms. If you say easier with respect to one thing, you're saying the other thing was harder by comparison. Now another thing, just to sort of sync these a bit, the Quran is not presenting resurrection as something other than creation. This is just a second act of creation. The literal Arabic actually says he will reproduce it, meaning he's going to do the same thing over again. So it's the same act that this time is going to be easier. So resurrection, I mean, we might think, okay, well, these things are
creating everything anew.
Yeah, so it's just another occasion when he's going to do the same thing. But the point is that he's already done it once before. And the suggestion is just think about it. This is the way a person would naturally think with respect to himself, right, or any other finite deity. If you do something, the next time you do it is probably going to be easier. Certainly, the more often you do it, it's going to become easier, right? And so what should be happening is if Allah's the one speaking, then it would simply say easy. It'll be easy for him. But if Muhammad's the one thinking and accidentally has a Freudian slip, right? The paganism that he's trying to cloak in the guise of Jewish and Christian monotheism, that cloak has sort of brushed aside like Zainab's robe or something, right? And now the paganism is being exposed. Muhammad has expressed himself as a pagan would, instead of how he should have if he were in fact literally verbally dictating or reciting what Allah had revealed to him. Now I see you're laughing, so somebody must have made some comment.
I'm laughing. Several people have posted something along these lines. Conal says, then he doesn't say B, he only says B, making it easier. He doesn't say the whole B. It's got to be easier. So
that's funny. I wouldn't have got that initially. Yeah, but now, what do you think, David? What do you think when Muslims run into a statement of the Quran? So, of course, I mean, I'm not the. I think I'm the first person that I know of apologetically who's noticed this. I'm not so arrogant as to think nobody has noticed this, but I've never heard, and I've read and listened to people, so I think I'm pretty well familiar with a lot of stuff out there, but. I'm sure that Muslims have to have seen this, right?
Yeah, so, actually, we've got some dispute from Nona Bubble here, and we could probably ask some of the Arabs, some of the Arab speaking, both Muslims and Christians, and anyone else, atheists, whoever, in the chat who want to comment on this. But Nona says in Arabic, there's no easy, easier. Easier, there's only easiest, I think she meant there. There is only 2 degrees. It's either easy or easiest. I got some problems because we got all sorts of commentaries and all kinds of translators who say it's easier. I know Arabic has a comparative, like Allahu Akbar is not God is great or even God is greatest. It's God is greater. Right. And so you've got the comparative. So everyone, Nona Bubble here is saying that there's no comparative of...
Let me make a couple of observations here. If you go online to the IslamAwakened.com website and you select the link at the top called Quran, you scroll down to Surah 30:27, and then you go to the... if you scroll up here...
Why are you pointing to it? They can't see where you're pointing.
But I'm telling you in case you want to do this. But and then, so if you go to Surah 30:27, you'll notice a row of 4 columns there. If you press the word for word column...
It says easier.
Right. And
yeah,
then
matter of fact, I can put this on the screen.
Yeah.
I'll put this on the screen so people know what we're talking about.
But now this is just one option. So this is it gives you the breakdown of the words. It tells you what they mean. It's an Arabic corpus. Okay, so there it has easier. I went before, when I saw this, I thought this is a huge issue. I should make sure that what I think I've discovered is in fact valid. So I went, first of all, I just texted Al Fadi, right? I texted him because he's a native Arabic speaker, and he said, "You're right." And then he went and checked a bunch of Arabic commentaries, and he said, "They all agree with you," right? And then... now I'm going to make a video on this. This is, we're doing a live stream now, but I'm going to make a more succinct video, just sort of distilling a lot of this. I searched. One of the things I like to do in my videos is I like to find Muslims who are making certain observations that I'm making, so people can't, use the Arabic trump card and say you don't speak Arabic, or other excuses that people make. And I have videos of Muslim scholars who are trying to deal with this verse. So this isn't me making up a meaning for an Arabic term. It's on the you can find it in standard reference works, you can find it in the commentators, you find it in Muslim scholars. Nobody, I think, who's ever heard Yasser Qadi would accuse him of not knowing Arabic, for example.
Actually, Joe is putting easy, easier, easiest, and he's putting the Arabic words there. Guys, you Arabic speakers, look at what's up on the screen. So you have the Arabic of the verse there, and then you have the literal. So they just translate it word by word, giving the literal translation, and they translate this part as "it is, and it is easier for him, and for him is the description." So.
Yeah, and there's even a further breakdown. I won't have you go there, but if you use this tool, you'll eventually notice there's another way to look at the breakdown of various words, and it shows you that the word means easier. It's ahwanu. Now, so that's not how Muslims who are scholars try to deal with the verse, right? They know that the word means easier. And
they try to explain some reason for it.
Right. And what do you call that?
The miracle of reinterpretation.
That's right. And so what you normally find in the commentators is not somebody making the claim that the word doesn't really mean easier. What you have them doing is trying to reinterpret what Allah is doing here. And so the classic response is from Ibn Abbas. Okay, so notice this. Ibn Abbas is trying to deal with this issue. Why would Ibn Abbas, of all people, right? He is the cousin of Muhammad. Do you think he knew Arabic?
I'd say he probably knew it pretty good.
Yeah. So Ibn Abbas is trying to deal with this, and here was his argument. He says what Allah is doing here is he's saying, if, this is what he means, right? If it were hard for him the first time, then it would be easier for him the second time. Because whenever somebody does something, it's easier the second time than it is the first time. So Ibn Abbas is presupposing that it means easior. And if Ibn Abbas doesn't know Arabic, then I'm afraid nobody else does, right? I mean, he certainly knows the Quranic Arabic better than anyone else does. He's the cousin of Muhammad. And so, but notice, this is not what the Quran says, right? This is a reinterpretation of the Quran. Ibn Abbas has to add words to the verse in order to make it consistent with what Ibn Abbas knows would have to be the actual expression if he was going to say something that's consistent with his absolute power, right? So Ibn Abbas knows that the verse, as it is stated in the Quran, does not communicate accurately. So notice though what ends up happening if you follow Ibn Abbas, right? Not only do you now have Allah expressing himself in a way that exposes that he's not really all powerful, but now what you're doing is you're tacitly admitting that Allah did not express himself in the best way. Mm-hmm. But don't Muslims also say that Allah is all wise? Doesn't the verse say Allah is all wise?
Yeah, and you might want to include this when you discuss. He claims to be the best of all communicators, right? He's constantly saying how clear he is. Just to I'm sure those of you who've been following the chat have seen that you had multiple Arabic speakers confirm that it says easier here, and thus the literal translation right here is correct, and Ibn Abbas was correct.
Yeah, so Muhammad's companion, his cousin, whose interpretations of the Quran are, vastly sought after, right? I mean, Ibn Abbas was not a chump. So Ibn Abbas is a heavyweight when it comes to our knowledge of the Quran and early traditions about Muhammad. So Ibn Abbas took for granted that this is the meaning of the word, didn't even try to deal with it by denying its obvious meaning. Rather, what he tried to do was give the verse an interpretation that would get Allah off the hook. The problem is that his interpretation requires restating what Allah says, not changing the meaning of the word, but restating it in a different argument, right? He basically turns it into a different argument. What Allah says in the Quran is, he created things the first time, so reproducing it will be easier for him. He didn't say, if it was hard the first time. That's a conditional statement, right? If it were hard the first time, then the next time it would be easier. No, what he says is, in fact, it was something he did the first time, and it will be easier the second time.
Guys, you getting all that? So, Ibn Abbas, who learned the Quran from the man himself. Ibn Abbas learns the Quran from his cousin Muhammad himself. He's the guy who starts the field of Quranic studies. He writes his tafsir on the Quran. And he realizes it's very strange to say that the new creation, resurrecting everything, is easier for Allah than creating it, because to create it, all he had to do was say be, and then created everything. So what's going to be easier than that? So Ibn Abbas says, what Allah really means here is that if it had been hard for him to create, which it wasn't, but if it had been, then it would have been easier for him the second time around because he would have learned something. But that's not what Allah is saying. He's just saying if it had been hard, then it would be easier this time. And so what Anthony's pointing out is, if that's what Allah meant, then Allah once again is a horrible communicator, right? So he's supposed to be picking his words perfectly, and yet the same thing that we have today, right? The exact same thing that we have today. When we say, Allah says in the Quran that if your wife gets out of line, you smack and beat her into submission. No. What Allah meant there is you tap her with a toothbrush. That's all he meant there. Okay, well, what you're telling me there is he's really, really, really bad at communication, right? What does Allah mean when he says, fight those who do not believe in Allah? Oh, he means fight people who are attacking you. Well, why didn't he say fight those who are attacking you then? Why didn't he say that? Why are you a much better communicator than Allah if that's what he meant? And so...
because communicating was easier for Ibn Abbas.
Yeah.
No doubt if Allah had a second chance to take a go at it, he'd express himself much better.
So, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the Quran, Allah constantly brags about being the best communicator ever. I mean, he had all eternity to get his word perfectly clear. And yet, even though he had all eternity to get his words exactly the way he wanted, we have his followers constantly having to say what he really meant. And so this isn't just now. It's not just Shabir Ali and Zakir Naik and all the other Muslim apologists who are saying what Allah really meant, this goes back to the first generation. You've got Ibn Abbas saying, oh, easier. Oh, that would mean it was harder for him to create the first time. That's not going to make any sense. Well, what Allah really meant was, and then has to add a bunch of words that Allah didn't say, which means, as Anthony pointed out, you're in trouble either way. If you want to say Allah's perfectly clear and he said exactly what he meant, then he's got some problems. He's growing. He seems to be growing in power, so that he's learning how to do it, and so it's easier to do it a second time. But it was harder at the beginning. So you're either stuck with that problem, or you can do what Ibn Abbas does and says, well, what he really means is something else. In which case, he's not all wise. He's not a great communicator.
And in either way, he ends up being not very wise. You know why? Because either he needed Ibn Abbas to help him to state it accurately, or he, so either he said that this is easier for him, in which case he's not all powerful, or he needed Ibn Abbas. He still wanted to communicate that he was all powerful, right? Because that's part of the point of the verse. He's saying he's all powerful,
he's saying,
right?
He's saying he can do it however he wants, and then he accidentally.
Yeah. So either way, he shows his incompetence, and this then points up another issue. One thing that people aren't very good at in our day, unless they're really working at it, is being good theological thinkers. I mean, with respect to theology proper, the doctrine of God. Most people, you know that God is omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, these sorts of things, but you don't necessarily think through how these attributes of God relate to each other and how tinkering with one attribute would affect everything else. You can't just, it's like pulling a thread on a garment, it unravels the whole thing. You can't mess with one aspect of God's character without ultimately ending up with something else entirely. And so if you take into account then the impression that this verse is giving us, the logical implication of this verse, that Allah's power moves from being weaker to being more powerful, something's harder at one point and easier at another, or his eloquence grows, either way, you're now also saying that Allah is a mutable being, right? Allah changes. But that's just huge once you start thinking about it. If Allah changes, then it means that he's not absolute, right? He's not the sole determining factor in reality. Something is happening that's affecting Allah, right? He's not unaffected by things. Something's happening that causes Allah to change. So Allah can't say for certain how things are going to be in the future. Right? He can't know that because he doesn't have absolute control over everything. He himself has certain things that are harder for him than other things. He is changing in the context of all this stuff. And so just like other mutable beings can become stronger, they also become weaker, right? People can grow in intelligence, but that intelligence will also start to wane the older they get in many cases, right? You get people whose minds aren't as sharp anymore, or they get Alzheimer's or what have you.
Matter of fact, that's brought up here.
Yeah, so
Pony Girl says, well, if Allah was so wise and powerful, why couldn't he get it right the first time? What about all those abrogated verses that Allah have Alzheimer's? And that's really what it seems like, right? Because when we bring up...
Or maybe Muhammad is actually the one who's coming up with all this stuff, and he's having some brain... farts or whatever.
He's got some. There's definitely a problem going on. But notice, if we listen to what Muslims say, what they tell us is that the more peaceful revelations that Muhammad was delivering in Mecca, to you be your religion and to me be my religion. That's what Allah really meant. And right there, he meant exactly what he said. And even later, when he was advocating defensive jihad, that if people are being oppressed or something like that, you have a right to stand up for yourself. There he meant exactly what he said. But towards the end of Muhammad receiving revelations, when Allah starts commanding Muslims to violently subjugate people and to kill people simply because of their beliefs, fight those who do not believe in Allah, that's when he really didn't mean what he said. He meant something else. And you ask, well, what did he mean when he said fight those who do not believe? Oh, he means fight people if they're attacking and oppressing it. Well, he'd already said that earlier in the Quran. Why do you need to say it again and say it in a way that's completely different from what he said earlier? Especially when he lays down as the proper method of interpreting the Quran the doctrine of abrogation, where later commands, if they contradict earlier commands, they cancel those earlier commands. So why did he do that if he really knows, oh gosh, I'm about to say this thing in a completely different way from the way I said it earlier, even though I mean the same thing? Back then I was clear. Now I'm going to say it. I'm going to mess it up. But I'm going to say it even though my followers are going to think that I'm actually commanding them to go fight people based on what they believe, and they're going to think the earlier commands have been abrogated, which is exactly what you find in the commentaries. Exactly what you find in the commentaries. It's these commands to violently subjugate people simply because of their beliefs. They abrogate or cancel earlier revelations. And so Allah just didn't seem to understand the mess he was creating. And if Muslims expect us to go along with that and allow them to offer that interpretation, then they're basically telling us that as Allah got older and older over a period of 23 years, so he aged pretty quickly, he just lost the ability to communicate clearly. And I've actually thought about doing this. I don't know how much you follow politics, but you got something similar with Joe Biden. That guy used to be really sharp and quick-witted. He used to crush people. He used to crush people in debates. He was really quick. Now he can't formulate thoughts, and just everyone understands that he's too old and he's losing it. That happens, ladies and gentlemen. That will most likely happen to pretty much all of us if we live long enough. We start losing our faculties, and so it makes sense with human beings. It makes sense with politicians. Very strange if that's how it happens if that's what happens with God, but that's what Muslims are telling us. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so what all this does really is it exposes the true origin, right? This stuff is originating in the mind of Muhammad, a pagan, or at least is, I'm not excluding the possibility of devilish involvement, but in that case it's even worse, right? I mean, but it's not coming from God. That's the one thing that's clear. If God were communicating, then he would speak in a way that's consistent with his absolute power. He wouldn't be saying this is easier for him as if he's, just recently got a gym membership and now can bench press twice as much as he used to be able to bench press. That's how Allah speaks in the Quran. So he exposes that he's not all powerful. He's not all wise because he's trying to say he's all powerful, even if he isn't. But he ends up saying that he's not all powerful, and he's not even wise enough, or as wise as Ibn Abbas. Notice, it's not just that Allah's wisdom isn't perfect and still has the potential to become greater. Ibn Abbas expresses it better than Allah did, right? If that's what Allah wanted to say, why was it so easy for Ibn Abbas but not for Allah? So Allah is no wiser in his choice of or manner of expressing himself than the cousin of Muhammad, another pagan, by the way. And this all implies that Allah is a mutable, changeable being. Now, here's my question. Okay, this really already lays out the problem, but I was telling David about this earlier. One of the things that I like to do, I've often thought, if I didn't pursue the vocation that I did, and for those that don't know, I serve I'm a pastor of prisons. I go into the prisons throughout the state I live in. So that's what I do vocationally. But if I didn't do that, one thing I would love to do is be a detective. I'd love to try and figure out cases, especially cold cases. I loved watching the other day when you had
J. Warner Wallace.
Yeah, J. Warner Wallace on. I just remember thinking that's the coolest job ever. But so what and David can attest to you that I think this way and have done so on other occasions, and it's led to some insights with respect to the development of Islam. But remember how I started out this broadcast? I mentioned that Muhammad often had to be corrected by the Jews. So Muhammad's final insights are the product of Jews correcting him. His initial insights were pagan to the core. His better and later insights were often the product of Jewish correction. Okay, and I don't mean here, things like his command to engage in jihad or something like that. I'm talking about his his better theological insights that are more consistent with monotheism. He never did weed out all of the paganism. It's still there. It's all over the place. But the Jews, every step of the way, are just, poking fun at Muhammad. They're putting their fingers on things, and Muhammad changing them. So I thought to myself, well, why is this problem still here in the Quran? Why did Muhammad never correct this problem? Why don't we ever have an account from the Jews? And it's possible that somebody just didn't record something, but I'm still thinking, I'm trying to figure out, why isn't there anything indicating that the Jews came along? They were so good at other times, right? Coming along, Muhammad, you're engaging in shirk. You're swearing by created things. You're associating yourself with Allah when you say, as Allah wills and I will, right? As if you are to be coordinated with Allah in your will. And so this is occurring to me, and I start thinking, well, wait a minute. Maybe there weren't any Jews left around at the time that Muhammad gave this revelation. Maybe Allah didn't have the foresight to keep the Jews around since they proved to be his greatest teachers. Right? If Allah and Muhammad are constantly learning at the feet of the Jews, then it would have made sense for Allah to keep the Jews around. But eventually, Muhammad kills Jews or drives them from Arabia, right? Or he kicks them off their land or what have you. So maybe, I'm thinking, maybe there were no Jews around to correct Muhammad. But then I hit a snag, and I was telling David about this. I hit a snag because if you look at the period of revelation where Surah 30 falls, Surah 30 is a Meccan surah, which means it came before his hijrah, his migration to Medina. And so that also means that it came before Muhammad waylaid the Jews. But then I did some more digging. I kept digging. What most people don't know is that while we classify surahs according to their period of revelation, right? A surah either comes from the pre-Hijrah period and is called a Meccan surah, usually meaning that it was revealed in Mecca, but some of them were revealed outside of Mecca, but it's that period when Muhammad still lived in Mecca, right? The post-Hijrah surahs are referred to as Medinan surahs. So most people think if you've got a Meccan surah, then the entire surah is from the Meccan period. But that's not actually correct. And I'm not just saying, what Christians will say. This is what Muslims will tell you. If you pick up a book like Ulum al-Quran, written by Ahmed van Denver, or any book dealing with the science of Quranic interpretation, Neil Robinson, his book, Interpreting the Quran, or I'm not sure if I'm getting the title exactly right, but he also points this out. Theodore Noldik, who's a well-known Orientalist scholar of Islam. Numerous scholars, Muslim and non-Muslim, point out that while it is true that the surahs are classified according to different periods as either Meccan or Medinan, it isn't the case that every single verse in those surahs came exclusively from those periods. In fact, some verses from the later period were added by Muhammad to surahs from the earlier period. Muhammad would say, he'd get a verse and he'd say, okay, put this in that surah. And that's why, it's one reason why the Quran ends up looking like such a jumbled mess, right? Because you're inserting verses from an entirely different period, smack dab in the middle of an earlier surah, and he didn't even seem to have really good regard for what was going on in the context of that surah. So let me just read something from Ahmed van Denver real quick, just so you see what I'm talking about. So this is a Muslim. This is from his book Ulum al-Quran, page 89. He says, many surahs of the Quran do contain material from both periods of revelation, and in some cases there exists difference of opinion among scholars concerning the classification of a particular passage. So the surah can be Meccan, while a verse could have come from the Medinan period. Now, that's just part of the puzzle. This here's another statement, and this actually brings the whole argument full circle. This comes from the Study Quran. It's produced by Muslim scholars, and this is found in their footnote on on verse 27 of Surah 30. They say, All commentators agree that Al-Rum, that's Surah 30, was revealed during the Meccan period, although some Muslim scholars maintain that verses 27 and 28 are from the Medinan period. Now notice, people, I mean, if my method here was arbitrary, what is the likelihood of it answering so exactly to this method that I'm saying was so true of Muhammad in all these other cases, right? I didn't know ahead of time that this was the answer. I looked at the pattern of Muhammad's, his method. In past cases, this final view of Muhammad was a result of Muhammad first teaching stupid paganism, then being corrected by the Jews, and then finally Allah gets a bright idea and tells Muhammad, no, Muhammad, let's do it this way. I think the Jews have something there, right? Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, why does Allah not appear to have any better knowledge of the previous scriptures than Muhammad did? Mm-hmm. Right? It's one thing to say that Muhammad was illiterate. Remember, what do Muslims say? How does Muhammad know the content of the previous scriptures if he's not receiving revelation from Allah? Right? We're not claiming that Muhammad was quoting the previous scriptures, but he does claim, they do say, oh, he's giving the stories of the previous prophets, he's doing all these things. Well, all that just reflects the oral culture Muhammad lived in, where he heard and overheard things.
And that's in the Quran as well, right? He keeps getting accused. You're just hearing this from these other people, and you're talking to this guy, and that's where you're copying your stories from.
Yeah. So all I'm getting at here is that this is the order of things. Muhammad says something dumb, the Jews correct him, Allah finally learns, and the revelation changes. Okay, so then I see this new problem, which is obviously pagan. What Allah goes from being
now you're being scientific, right?
Yeah.
Now you've got a hypothesis. This is how it works. Therefore, I've got this situation. Therefore, it should play out like this. And you come up with your hypothesis. This is actually going to be not Meccan but Medinan. And then you go and it's actually confirmed.
Yeah, and it's surprising too, because notice the surah itself turns out to be a Meccan surah, and I'm thinking, oh, that just shoots my theory. So there's got to be some other explanation for this, right? So I keep digging, and I find out that certain scholars, these two verses, right, 27 and 28, happen to be the verses that people say came from the Medinan period. I'm thinking, gosh, what are the chances? It's a hypothesis that turns out to be golden. It turns out to be all too true. And this is just the sort of thing that a person would do when they're, trying to investigate something, or, not just in science, but, if you see, when they try and track down serial killers, right? They're looking for patterns. This is how this guy operates, right? And that's often how they're able to find this person, because he's got patterns. Mm-hmm. So the truly brilliant serial killer would be random, right? I mean, among other things. But so that's all I did, and so this problem shows Allah is not all powerful. He's not all wise. He's not immutable, and therefore His promises can't be trusted. Right? Allah can't be trusted in His promises. The very verse where He's promising to resurrect things ends up being a verse where He exposes Himself as the very opposite of what He claims to be in the verse. He claims to be all-powerful and all-wise. He turns out to be neither of those, and He's also not immutable. And there's not a good reason to think He's going to become wiser in the future, rather than
if He's getting worse.
Yeah, but the Jews aren't around, so
yeah.
So what are his chances?
Yep, he's in all kinds of trouble. All right, take a few comments here.
He should have waited until he got his doctorate.
We'll take a few comments here, and then Anthony can go ahead and summarize everything and make sure you got that. So anyway, the key point is check that verse. Go through some translations. Look at some translations like Hilali Khan, Pickthall. They give the translation as easier, and learn to make that point. Jason here says, if Allah is all-powerful and all-knowing, then why he says the gospel has been corrupted? Allah cannot save His holy scripture. Jason, you've been getting your information about the Quran from Muslims who that's not what the Quran says. There's nowhere that Allah says that the gospel has been corrupted. That's what Muslims say. But notice how this really brings to the surface the same kind of issue, right? If Allah was trying to say that the gospel has been corrupted, and instead he keeps saying no one can change his words, we still have to judge by the gospel, we still have the gospel, we have no ground to stand upon unless we stand upon the gospel, then once again he is a horrible, horrible, horrible communicator. He's a horrible communicator who can't say what he actually means, and Muslims need to come along and rescue him and say what he really meant. Or if he were saying that it's been corrupted, well, guess what? Then he couldn't protect his word, and so he's got a problem with his power. So no matter what the situation is, if Muslims are right, and Allah just, he couldn't protect the word, then they've got a problem. If Allah couldn't communicate what he actually means, then he's got a problem. If we're right, and Allah does nothing but affirm the inspiration and preservation and authority of the gospel, and yet contradicts the gospel, then he's still got a problem with ignorance. He doesn't know what's in the book. So Allah would be illiterate like his prophet. Wouldn't that be coincidence? If this book that's delivered by an illiterate prophet also has a God who's illiterate and just doesn't know what's in any of these scriptures, that'd be pretty amazing coincidence there, unless we conclude that Muhammad is the real source of the revelations.
Yeah, and notice just one aspect of this. I was thinking about this the other day. You know that the Quran claims that prophets were sent to every nation. Now, some Muslims will break these things down differently. Some make a major distinction between prophet and messenger, or apostle and prophet or messenger. The difference between the term Rasul and Nabi. Some will say that one refers to somebody who receives inspiration, and the other one refers to somebody who receives inspiration and a book or a scripture. In any case, according to Muslims, it's not just the gospel that was sent previously. There were many books that were sent before. We have certain books that are named. Mm-hmm. You have a book that was supposedly sent down to Abraham, a book that was sent to Moses, a book that was sent to David, and a book that was sent to Jesus. And those are just representative samples of the books that were sent. We can assume there were a great many other books sent to people besides, right? If there's 124,000 prophets sent to all these different nations so that they would know Allah, and according to the Quran, the reason these revelations are given is so that people will recognize Muhammad and confirm him as a prophet when he comes, right? That's the stated reason why these things are being given, right? So notice, to me, this is just incredible to think that Allah, his intention in giving these revelations, in fact, he even makes the prophets swear they're going to, this is their whole, reason for being, right? That they're to support him, to affirm him, to point to him, right? So if Allah does all of this, but then lets those things become corrupted before Muhammad ever comes on the scene, how incredibly incompetent, right? It's like
pretty incompetent.
Yeah, but notice how often he's incompetent. His track record of accomplishing preservation, which he claims he's going to do for the Quran, is a whopping 0, or he has 100% failure rate, right? How incompetent is that?
Maybe it was easier for him to protect the Quran.
Yeah, by that point he's like, gosh, I realize how I blew it there. I blew it
he
there.
Learned his lesson.
Satan cut me off at the pass there. Those dirty Jews, they underhandedly,
Yeah.
So if 124,000 prophets that Allah spoke to and through, and however many books, all got corrupted. Allah has 100% failure rate. I can't think of a more incompetent deity. No. Zeus.
Allah's incompetence is on 1 million, right? He's like Super Saiyan God level with the incompetence.
Yeah.
All right. This is a totally different topic, but brothers, what can I say to a Muslim who says that I am rude for talking bad about his prophet and his beliefs when my hope is for him to come to Christ? Well, you don't let Muslims get away with that, right? I mean, it's different if you're in a Muslim country where they could actually kill you for talking about Muhammad or get you arrested or something like that on blasphemy charges. Don't do that there. Let us speak to them through the internet. But if you're in a place where you have the freedom to talk to people and you're protected, your speech is protected by the law. You say whatever you want about Muhammad. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to be a jerk about it. You can get the same information across. In fact, I have a video. It's called How to Share Unpleasant Facts with Pleasant Muslims, right? So unpleasant facts about Islam with pleasant Muslims. And what I mean there is, you can run right up to someone and say, hey, your prophet had sex with a 9-year-old girl. What a pervert, right? But you could present that same information in a way that's more likely to keep the conversation going. So, you could say, hey, you told me that Muhammad is the greatest man ever, and I was looking at some of your sources, and here's some of the stuff I found. I was wondering, could you tell me what you think about this? It's much more likely that you're going to get information across like that. So I would encourage that. But if someone is just saying you shouldn't bring up any information that's critical of my prophet, you got to cut. You got to step in at that point. I would encourage you to learn a few things about the Quran and Islam, because if the person says, I'm not talking to you because you say mean things about my beliefs and my prophet. You say, okay, is that wrong? Is it immoral to criticize someone in that way? And if the person says yes, then you could just go, okay, well, Surah 98 verse 6 says that Jews and Christians are the worst of creatures. So you just condemned your own God, right? Do you understand how you condemned your own God there? You can, of course, go to passages which talk about actually fighting and subjugating Jews and Christians because of our beliefs. And so you point out, hey, I'm doing way less than your God orders you to do. Your God orders you whenever you get the chance to subjugate me or to kill me, to force me to pay you or you kill me. So I mean, if you have a problem with me simply speaking, you got some issues. Your God and your prophet say to do way worse. But if you want, and it's good to learn, some of these passages. This is a passage from the history of Al-Tabari. So, the history of Al-Tabari. One of Muhammad's companions was asked about what was the worst treatment he ever received from the Quraysh. So it's the history of At-Tabari, volume 6, pages 101 to 102. Watch how Muhammad was. What was the worst attack you saw by the Quraysh upon the messenger of God when they openly showed their enmity to him? He replied, I was with them when their nobles assembled one day in the Hijr and discussed the messenger of God. They said, we have never seen the like of what we have endured from this man. He has derided our traditional values, abused our forefathers, reviled our religion, caused division among us, and insulted our gods. We have endured a great deal from him. Notice how Muhammad interacted with the pagans of his own tribe. He derided their values, abused their forefathers, reviled their religion, caused division among us, and insulted their gods. So if your friend thinks it's wrong and immoral to do that sort of thing, great. He just condemned his own prophet. And you can ask, why are you so hypocritical? Your prophet's going around doing way worse than me simply talking about your prophet, and yet that you think it's perfectly fine. So do you think there are two different standards, is what you asked. So are you telling me there's two different standards, that I have to sit here and your religion can constantly attack and insult me and my beliefs, and I just have to keep my mouth shut? Whereas I'm not allowed to so much as question anything you say, because it sounds like you're advocating for some sort of system where you're superior and everyone else is inferior and everyone has to do what you want them to do. And that's telling me a lot about your religion, actually. And that's making me very, very concerned about your religion. So I'd go about it that way. But yeah, don't let people get away with it if they're telling you you don't get to talk about Muhammad. Muslims have gotten away with that for 14 centuries because Muslims were generally in a certain part of the world, and they would chop your head off for criticizing Muhammad. We're not in that position here. So they need to understand you guys don't get to continue operating by those rules where we have to keep our mouths shut about your prophet. You have the most obvious false prophet in history. He did some of the sickest, stupidest stuff I've ever even heard of anyone doing. And if anyone deserves to be mocked, it's your prophet. So you need to take it. You need to man up. You need to man up. If your prophet didn't want us making fun of him, he shouldn't have done all the horrible stuff he did. All right. Anything you wanted to, you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think you covered it.
All right. Well, I guess we could, we should probably, Should probably check the super chats over here. All right, guys, we're going to check the super chats. Going to respond to the super chats, and then we're going to cut out. But we should be back tomorrow night, right?
Yeah.
We'll be back. We'll be back live again tomorrow night. In fact, if you guys have a specific topic that you'd like us to cover for tomorrow, let us know. Not in the chat because we're not. I'll check the comments later. So after this is over, leave a comment in the comments if you got a specific topic you'd like us to address tomorrow, and we'll check it out. All right, let's check out some of the super chats. Probably won't get through all of these because we got work to do. We're here to work, not sit around doing nothing, which is what Anthony's trying to do. He's trying to just go live the entire time. Marilyn Murphy says, if Allah is the best of deceivers, then no one in their right mind would pay heed to anything he says. Yeah, but believe it or not, some of the early Muslims started to realize that, right? So they realized that you've got Allah in the Quran constantly bragging about being the best of deceivers. And so the result was that Abu Bakr, Muhammad's closest companion, said, if I had 1 foot in paradise, I would still fear Allah's deception. Notice, that was someone who realized what sort of God he's serving. He's serving an omnipotent deceiver. And that means that deceiver could be lying and tricking you about anything, even going to paradise. He could just be tricking you. Notice, Abu Bakr was one of the few people who were guaranteed to go to paradise by Muhammad himself. So Abu Bakr was thinking, Allah might even be deceiving me through Muhammad. And so that's someone who finally understood what sort of God he was dealing with. So yeah, certainly difficult to trust a God who's like that.
And notice the incredible epistemological problem that creates. Just take the verse we were thinking of, Surah 30:27. We've pointed out that it's a problem. It exposes that Allah is not omnipotent, omniscient, and immutable, right? He doesn't have all power, isn't all wise, isn't unchanging. But maybe that incompetence and everything else is part of Allah's trick, right? Maybe he wants to communicate that. Mm-hmm. In which case, I mean, that's not a better position for things to be in. But my point is, it just throws everything into this incredible confusion, right? You can't tell if his blunder is really intentional, or so when is he telling the truth or not telling the truth? That's just never going to be a possibility you can see through. If Allah is an omnipotent deceiver, but the other thing is, I mean, he boasts about being the greatest deceiver, but I don't know if he even pulls that off. The best, because again, he's trying in this verse to say that he is all powerful, but he ends up saying he's not, right? So he's not the best deceiver. He ends up, I mean, he might be the most willing to deceive, the most desperate, the most anxious to deceive. He might sincerely want to be the best, but I think he proves himself pretty incompetent because he blows it all the time.
Yeah,
who blows it more often than Allah?
Yeah, he is pretty bad. I actually want to. I've got for Ramadan. I'm basically getting all these comments of Muslims just pretty much begging me to stop going after their God. It's like, too late, guys. Too late. You could have been nice earlier on, years ago. But you don't get to start begging just when I start, finally just completely wrecking your prophet on a daily basis. But they're asking what my problem is, and one of the things I want to say is, I open up your Quran and it says Allah's the best of deceivers, and I think, okay, that makes sense. But then Muslims tell me it actually means best of plotters. He's the best of people who plot, right? And see, that's why he annoys me, and that's why I got to come after him, because he's not the best of plotters. I'm the best of plotters. He's trying to steal my thunder, right? You got to understand. You Muslims who are running around saying Allah's the best of plotters. No, he's not. Look at how much I wreck him. Come on. All right. Let's see. Eric Brown says, I was taking a nap. I started reading it. I might as well finish. He said, I was taking a nap, but I woke up to the sound of Allah being bent over and spanked by D. Wood and Anthony. Love you guys. God bless. We got Cheryl R. and Apple Goo with the super stickers.
So this reminds me, I was talking with some people the other day about Martin Luther. Mm-hmm. And if you know anything about Luther, he was a guy who had incredible wit. In fact, I think you'd
He was savage.
Yeah, you'd love reading certain things. And he was just witty all around, witty when it came to any subject. So if he was ridiculing a stupid belief, one of the things that really irked Luther was the sale of indulgences. He thought that corrupt people were preying upon poor souls, right? And trying, Tetzel was going around, Johann Tetzel, going around Germany and other places, trying to sell forgiveness, sell time off in purgatory, and he would come up with these jingles like, every time a coin in the pitcher rings, a soul from purgatory springs. It's one of the catchy tunes that he would sing. And Luther switched that up. He says every coin in the pitcher, the Pope gets richer and richer. but Luther, there's this quote that always sticks with me, and that comment just reminded me of it. Luther, whenever he was sick, he always thought he was going to die, right? So he said one of the. And I hope everybody they've got their ears ready. This is not too crude, but it's a little graphic in the description. But he said. He says, the world is like he says, I am like a ripe stool, and the world is like a gigantic anus, and we are about to depart. Or it's
I'm about to depart.
Yeah, it's about to let me loose or something.
It's about to shoot me out. The earth's about to roll some logs. The earth's about to heave a Havana. Nick Tam said, as Surah 2:106 is about abrogation, how can anyone be sure about the Quran being fully correct with the tablet in heaven? Maybe it has already been abrogated. Any thoughts on that? Well, supposedly the doctrine of abrogation refers to commands. So, and the problem here is some of the commands that were abrogated were taken out of the Quran. Like Muslims will say that the command to breastfeed grown men in order to do away with any sort of sexual attraction between the man and the woman, that was abrogated, and that's why it was taken out. Well, you've got other verses in the Quran which were abrogated, and they're still in the Quran. So who's deciding which gets taken out of which abrogated verses get taken out of the Quran and which abrogated verses stay in the Quran? And notice, if you have abrogated verses that are taken out of the Quran, then the Quran that we have right now does not match the eternal Quran, the tablet in heaven. So Muslims have a defective copy of that. And you'd have to say that the eternal Quran in heaven, the eternal tablet, which has all the abrogated verses in it, it's a copy of the Quran that just contains contradictions. It contains contradictory commands telling you different things to do. So once again, it's a problem no matter what you do. No matter which direction you go, you got a problem.
Yeah, and one other thing, although when Muslims try to define the doctrine of abrogation, you might have noticed that David stated it technically. He says, in theory, it's only commands that are abrogated. And the reason he stressed that, although he wasn't, the point wasn't to go into that, but you stress that because you know as well as I do that it also affects doctrinal issues. Yep. So they claim that it's just him changing commands because it sounds better to say that Allah changed what was required at one time as opposed to another than it does to say...
And that would make sense. You're a person in these circumstances. Yeah. You're a person in these circumstances, and so later people who are in different circumstances, I can always change the rule for them. But it doesn't make sense if he's changing historical claims or theological claims or something like that, which aren't based on that. And so it's got to be commands, and yet it's not commands.
Yeah,
it's not just commands. It's all kinds of stuff.
Even in the area of commands, you can see how some commands, but just like we do with our children, right? Like maybe when they're younger, we say they have to be in at 5. Right, before it gets dark. And then as they get older, they get more privileges. And that has to do with issues of maturity and safety and, just all sorts of issues, right? Mm-hmm. It's not that the morality of something is changing. It's other factors that make this now an okay situation. But it's not like Allah can say murder is okay at one time and not at another without that being a problem. Because now you're talking about fundamental morality here, right? But in fact, even the commands involve theological or doctrinal issues. You just can't escape it. For example, one of the things you have, if you don't have a doctrine of abrogation, you have contradictions in the Quran, more than you already have, right? Right? You have to have a doctrine of abrogation, or else you're left with all these contradictions. So,
And but by the way, side note, what's funny is if you look at the historical background of the verses on abrogation, it's that people started making fun of Muhammad for changing his revelations. So Muhammad's getting these revelations, and they're changing, and people eventually start noticing, and they actually are making fun of the Muslims, saying, your prophet says one thing, and then the next day tells you something else. What a joke. And that's when the revelation comes down. Oh yes, I got a revelation. The revelation is saying that Allah can change his revelations because he keeps bringing better stuff. Just keeps bringing something better to replace it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, so one thing I'm thinking of is in Surah 4, and I want to do a video on this tomorrow or whenever we do it, but in Surah 4, you have a statement. One of the things that's incredible, because of the method of compiling the Quran and how Muhammad did things, a lot of times the verse that's... sometimes when one verse abrogates something, it's found in an entirely different surah. Other times it's found in the same surah. Sometimes it's found in a verse prior to the verse that's being abrogated. It just results in this incredible confusion. So in Surah 4, though, as an example, you have one verse saying that Allah won't forgive people who delay repentance until death, right? Meaning they wait until they're about to die and then they repent. So that's unforgivable, delayed repentance. The other thing it says is it's unforgivable if a person is a disbeliever, dies as a disbeliever. But then later Allah says that what he won't forgive, what's unforgivable, is shirk, right? But he'll forgive anything that's less than that. But that's in the same surah, Surah 4. In fact, there's 3 verses that do this. So you end up having 3 verses contradicting each other. But in Islamic theological categories, or legal categories, they actually distinguish between disbelief and shirk. Disbelief is not as great as shirk. Disbelief just means you're not believing the right thing. Shirk is positively ascribing partners to Allah. So here you have a change, Allah going from saying these 2 things are unforgivable to saying this one thing is unforgivable. But notice what it involves. It involves issues of theology. Right? It's not like these are theologically neutral things, which assumes that theology has somehow changed. But how can that be? Right? Unless the underlying theology changes, Allah changes or something like that. You really can't keep that sort of thing up, and Muhammad certainly didn't do it with any consistency. Because Allah is not all-wise.
Allah's got some issues here. David Melnick says, hey David, been watching you and Nabil since late 2015 when I got saved and was a missionary in Bangladesh for half a year. Keep up the great work. Wait, you got saved when you were a missionary in Bangladesh? I must be reading that wrong. I'm guessing. I think you're saying you got saved in 2015 and then you ended up as a missionary in Bangladesh. Unless you're just saying, hey, I went off to be a missionary in Bangladesh and then I didn't really know the gospel and then I got saved.
There's an old story of a famous Puritan who, and if you know anything about Puritans, they were pretty rigorous. Their logical analysis of things, and they were powerful in their preaching and so forth. Sometimes they get a bad rap. Some were a little extreme, but there's a story of this preacher who he prepares his sermon, and while he preaches it, he's converted. He actually records that he was converted through his own preaching. It's like it suddenly hit him what he's talking about.
That's funny. It's like Dan Wallace taught himself Greek.
Yeah, from his own book.
Yeah, from his own books. Yeah, guys. Dan,
he had an Allah moment.
Yeah, Dan. Matter of fact, that might be a good video. Him, Dan Wallace, and Allah. So Dan Wallace is a famous Greek New Testament scholar, and he had learned Greek until he was the one writing the textbooks on New Testament Greek, and then he had some sort of brain infection that wiped out his memories of certain types of things. And one, he just completely lost all his knowledge of Greek. So he used his own books to teach himself Greek again, and then became,
That's incredible to me. Yeah. He became a Greek scholar twice. Now, maybe there were some.
He probably had a
aptitude.
Natural ability. Yeah, probably has good natural ability.
But still,
for
that's just incredible to me.
Impressive.
They used his textbook, one of the textbooks we used for Greek in seminary, and I read it all the time because it takes a while to get certain things down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, here's this guy who has mastered the language twice, and I have to keep reading and rereading and rereading his stuff, and I'm just sort of like incrementally moving along with things, whereas he has, bit the whole thing off.
Mm-hmm. Rachel Diaz says, I'm a Christian. I'm going to look into buying a Quran. Which one is the best translation? Which one would you guys recommend? Thank you for your work. That's going to depend, Rachel. If you're interested in apologetics dealing with Islam, I would not recommend starting with the Quran. And the reason is I've seen too many people give up. The Quran is just too boring. It's too hard to read, and so they give up studying. If you want to learn apologetics, I would recommend studying topically, right? So pick a topic like when something you're interested in. If you want to look up all the Quran passages that talk about Jesus or something like that, or if you were interested in refuting jihad or something like that, look up all the Quran passages on that, because it's just a big mess. It's a big, hard, difficult to understand mess. So I would recommend studying, reading a couple books and studying it topically, and then somewhere down the road, read the Quran all the way through. But if you just want to, if you want to read the Quran, you're wondering, which Quran to get, that's going to depend as well. The easiest Quran I've ever had to read was it's by someone named Halim. His last name is Halim. I forget his first name.
Abdel Halim.
Abdul Halim, yeah, but that's the Oxford version. So if you type in Oxford Quran, the Halim translation is what comes up, and it's basically the guy just knew Arabic well and English very well. You have lots of people who don't know one or the other as well, right? So they kind of know English and they're translating, but they clearly don't have a great grasp on the English language. Halim is just the easiest to read, so you might want to go with that if you're just trying to get through it. If you want something that's not watered down, you might want to get something like the Hilali Khan. Of course, you're going to have problems with any English translation, but you might want something like the Hilali Khan, which is put out by Salafis. If you want a popular version, Yusuf Ali is a really popular edition. So, yeah, kind of depends on what you're looking for.
I've always found Yusuf Ali very helpful because he actually did have a good command of Arabic and English.
I think it's garbage.
Well, but I think he improves the Quran a great deal. If you read the footnotes, and this is what I really valued and found useful, because his footnotes, especially the older ones, I hear they've revised some, and it's harder to get some of the older stuff.
Yeah.
But his footnotes are often devastating.
They are. They're massively helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
footnotes are awesome.
He's not trying to.
His footnote on 6114, where he's talking about the Romans. Yeah. Awesome stuff.
Oh yeah. So he's got a lot of useful material. He's not trying to help Christians, he's trying to be a Muslim, but he's got these footnotes that are really helpful. So I always liked Yusuf Ali, but even his translation is not perfect. One thing that shows you just how terrible the Quran is you mentioned the Hilali Khan version. You've seen all the words in brackets.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
In fact, there's a funny story here. In the Bible, sometimes you'll see words that are in parentheses, and that just means that that's a parenthetical thought that was in the text, right? Mm-hmm. The author wrote those words, right? But Muslims, when they read translations of the Quran, there are all these words in brackets or parentheses, and it doesn't mean that those words are part of the Quran, but are a parenthetical aside of the author. That's something that's being added by the translator because the Quran is otherwise unintelligible gibberish, right? Mm-hmm. So I actually know of a Muslim, I won't even mention his name, but he's somebody you've interacted with, you've debated, and he wrote these articles one time where he was criticizing certain translations because it had words in parentheses. He thought they were being added, and so he came along and saying, "You guys are adding this to And I just busted out laughing because I'm thinking, oh, he's confused the convention for what Arab translators do with the Quran with what's happening in the Bible. Mm-hmm. We're not adding words. I mean, there are language differences that sometimes account for having to add, like a word just because one language doesn't require it and another language does to express the same thought, but that's not really adding to it, right? That's just like, you don't always have to use the verb to be in English, for example. Anybody reading it, in fact, I was working with my son on Latin the other day, and I'm not proficient in Latin, but I had a little bit of Latin, so I'm trying to get him started, and then I'm going to hand him off to somebody who's more competent than me. But we were running across these lines in Latin, and I'm thinking, wait, where's the verb at? And then I realized they have a verb in Latin, but it's not required in every sentence. Native Latin speakers will realize where that's happening. So if you express it in English, though, you're going to have to put the verb in there, is or whatever, John is tall or something. So, but in the Quran, you get entire phrases and sentences and all this other stuff. Because
and it's a couple kinds. One, it's as you point, it's just incoherent. You can't make sense of it without adding all these extra words. But then you have these moral changes, right? Like Surah 4, Surah 4 verse 34 says, "Beat them," and so Yusuf Ali puts in parentheses, "lightly." Just to be clear, you want to beat them lightly.
Yeah. So lightly that it leaves their skin turns green.
Yeah, it's okay if their skin turns green. Just make sure you don't beat them more than that.
One thing I saw the other day, I was looking at a commentary on Surah 4, and the commentator was trying to account for it, and of course they also have to add, by the way, that this is stages.
Yeah,
it doesn't literally express that this is.
Yeah. And in fact, if it has to be stages, then you can condemn Muhammad, because when Aisha got out of the line, he went and popped her right in the chest. He didn't warn her and then banish her to a separate.
And by the way, have you ever thought about this? Is kind of an aside, but have you ever thought about what was going on? I mean, the details of it is that he goes out and then she follows him. But
he's
why
supposedly praying for relief from the punishment of the grave for someone, but there is the issue of she doesn't trust this dude.
Yeah,
she doesn't trust this dude.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. She's like, what's he up to?
Yeah.
And by the way, you just brought up another. This is another thing that Muhammad learned from the Jews. One day, I don't have the hadith in front of me, but one day a Jewish woman was talking with Aisha. And during the conversation, as they're parting, the Jewish woman kind of, blesses her in a certain way. She says, "May Allah protect you from the punishment of the grave," meaning may your time in the grave be peaceful. And it says, the hadith says that Aisha was frightened. So Muhammad comes in, and Aisha asks him about it. And she says, "Is there punishment in the grave?" And he goes, "No, there isn't. Who told you that?" Basically. And then Muhammad goes out. And guess what? Basically, you can figure out what's happening. He has to go ask somebody about this. He's probably going out and learning from a Jewish person. But in any case, the Jewish person told Aisha. She asked Muhammad. He says no. And then later he comes back and says, "Allah just told me there is punishment in the grave."
That's not all Allah told him. Allah would eventually reveal that most of the punishment of the grave is for urinating improperly. You're peeing wrong, right? Not because you went and killed a bunch of people, or you massacred a bunch of people, or you molested a girl. None of that. You just were not peeing properly. You have to do the proper Muhammad position where you squat while peeing and stuff like that. And then other than that.
So what's funny is, so you've got all these hadiths where it says that Aisha says, after that, I never noticed, or she states it kind of odd, but it's almost like a devil negative. But she says it. He never stopped praying for the punishment of the grave, right? Like this became an obsession of his. You also have a bunch of hadith where it says that he heard Moses in his grave, he heard this person in his grave. He would walk by and hear Jews screaming.
Yeah, he could walk by graves and hear them. Yeah,
but notice, why wasn't he hearing them before, right?
Yeah, he suddenly gained the ability.
Yes,
he's like Allah. He's gaining abilities as he goes along.
Yeah,
it's easier for him.
A Jewish woman tells now. Notice this. You've got another link in the chain here. Okay, Muslims say it's Allah, then Muhammad, then his companions, and other people who are getting it. I said earlier that no, it's the Jews, then it's Muhammad, then it's Allah. Allah's always last, Muhammad's in the middle. But now we've got Aisha in here, right? It's the Jews, Aisha, Muhammad, now Allah. So Allah's third in line. He's getting further behind. Maybe his intelligence is...
It's getting rough. Abhishek Infinity said, David, please cover the topic taqiyya. I actually have covered that. If you look at my 3 stages of jihad, I cover it there. I also have a video titled, What is Taqiyya? And for a while, it was funny. That video would be at the top of Google searches. If you did a Google search for taqiyya or what is taqiyya, my video would pop up there at the beginning. I guess some people complained along the way, and I don't think it's like that anymore. But yeah, I've got a video. But yes, I am planning on making another video about taqiyya because I saw a video by, he's one of the internet atheists, genetically modified skeptic. I'd never seen one of his videos before, but I guess it came to me because it was an Islamic topic. I guess it came up to me as a recommendation. But he was explaining taqiyya, and he makes an important point. He gets a little bit right, but he's messing up. So probably gonna make a video titled something like "What Genetically Modified Skeptic Gets Right and Wrong About Taqiyya." So I'll have to clarify that again. All right, we got to cut out here, but a couple more super chat comments. Riaz Qureshi says, more boom boom room, please. Thank you. You guys are the best. Greg C. with the super sticker. Gerhard Peter said, hey, David, here's my project that I started to gather comments of Muslims leaving Islam from your YouTube videos. DavidHelpsMuslims.com. Welcome your feedback. So apparently Gerhard is collecting comments about Muslims who are leaving Islam after watching my videos. And I pointed out in a recent video that I used to do that. I used to take screenshots of the comments from Muslims who had left Islam and either become Christians or atheists. They usually become Christians or atheists or agnostics, something like that. So I would take pictures of them and post them, but it's just too time consuming to go through all of the comments. So a couple days ago, I posted, I don't know, 10 or so that were just, I just went through the comments on a couple recent videos and took screenshots. But yeah, so a lot of people were saying they're basically saying you need to do it anyway, David, because it's so encouraging to see how many Muslims are leaving Islam. So they're kind of telling me dedicate the time to it anyway, but I just don't have the time to go through all the comments. So it's cool if that's what other people want to do. But I will occasionally post post 8 or 10 or so, something like that. When I see a bunch at once, I'll just take a bunch of screenshots and share those. All right. Well, we had a lot more super chats, but we need to get off here because we have some work to get to. And so we're going to get to it. Should have another video up tomorrow. We'll be recording Anthony, and Lord willing, we will be live again. Share your comments in the comments section on what you'd like us to cover tomorrow. We'll try to pick a good one. Any final thoughts, Anthony?
No. I was going to say real quick though, when you do those videos, I think it's helpful also in addressing the people who criticize the method, right, of using mockery where it's appropriate, wit, and so forth. That's what often gets many Muslims to listen. It ropes them in. That's what hooks them, right? And then they end up saying that themselves, right?
Yeah.
You remember
they say I was mad at you at first, but then
you remember that years ago, I was talking with somebody that was criticizing your method.
Yeah,
and they were opposing it with somebody else. They used somebody else as an example and said, look at the way this person does it, right? And I said, well, how does that prove this method better? All you're doing is saying he does it differently, right? But you're saying that what he's doing is wrong. I mean, we don't have any criticism of this over here, right? How this is being done. But what you're doing is you're saying they're two different methods, but it's just arbitrary to say this one's right and this one isn't right unless you've got some reason. And then his reasoning was, well, people like this guy, and I'm thinking, well, that's not a very good reason, right? Our goal isn't to be liked, and Jesus wasn't liked by a lot of people. So, what if we take this person and set him next to Jesus? Now, what are you going to say, right? You're going to say this person's method's better than Jesus, who ended up being crucified, and then the person said, no, of course not. So then, what they tried to say is this person's method is more effective. He didn't say. He didn't make that claim exactly, but what he said is this one, is basically orchestrated, it will, that's what it will result in, right? It'll be more effective. And I said, well, if that's the case, and you got to account for why David's got, he has millions and millions of views. This is catching people's attention. Nobody's watching this for some reason, right?
Yeah, I always invite people. I say, if you think you've got a better way of doing it, because I think you can have all kinds of different ways of doing stuff, because there are all kinds of different kinds of Muslims. But if you really think, oh, David, if you did it this way, then it would be so much better. My response is usually, well, go do it that way.
Yeah.
Then come back. Then come back when you can say, you see how well this works.
Yeah, and you're not going to say if they have less numbers, of people saying they converted or whatever, or if they have more, you're not going to, your response will be praise the Lord. I mean, there's sarcasm, there's wit, there's all this other stuff that you do. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be like.
My only thought is, if you say my way is, because I don't go around doing that. I don't go around to people saying you need to do it my way. I tell most people don't do it my way, right?
Yeah.
So I don't go around telling everyone else they need to do it my way. But when you specifically say, David, you're doing it wrong, here's a better way to do it, I want to know what your evidence is for thinking that is an actual better way, and they never have any basis for saying it.
Yeah. So what this person did was, first of all, he tried to point to the large numbers that this person was getting in terms of views, and I said, David trumps that any day of the week. Now remember, I'm not saying this justifies your method.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying, if that's your criteria for why it's
defeats
wrong,
what that person was saying.
It doesn't make any sense. And then he said, well, this just turns people away and that sort of thing. And I said, have you seen these videos? I sent the videos that you did a long time ago of people cursing you one week or threatening to cut off your head 1 month, and then later attributing your video as the what prodded them and got them thinking about Islam. And in many cases, they even came to Christ, right? Because there's 2 steps to this. They got to leave Islam. They got to come to Christ. Some do come to Christ. Some only leave Islam. But in either case, it's a blessing to the world, right? You reduce the number of potential terrorists. So what? I'll just call this person Mr. X, but it's one of my favorite lines ever.
I remember it.
This person said, you have to know your Bible to catch this. This person said, he's appealing to numbers and effectiveness. If this method results in more people converting, then it's better. And he's apparently unaware of how many people are being converted through the method that David's employing. And so I said, I don't know what you're talking about. I gave him all these videos of these people saying they converted through this. And I said, David has slain his I said,
Mr. X.
Person X has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. Now, for those of you who don't know,
that's in the Bible.
Yeah, that goes back to the Old Testament. Remember, Saul was king, and then David, in his various exploits on behalf of Israel, had been very effective in battle in defeating Israel's enemies. And so even though David wasn't king at that time, the people started chanting, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. And Saul was just, incredibly incensed when he heard that.
Yeah, and those conversations normally go, David, this will never work. You're just going to drive Muslims away. You obviously haven't been paying attention, because here are all these tons of Muslims who left Islam. They say, yeah, but it's unbiblical. And I showed them a bunch of stuff in the Bible where they were coming out blasting. And then it goes back to, yeah, but it would work. It would work better if you did it this way. And then it's, okay, first you go show me. You go do everything you're saying, and then come back and show that you've got a better way. And then I'll think about it. All right, guys. Fred Sanford says David has blocked thousands, but Sam tens of thousands. That's a good one. All right, everyone, we have to cut out now, but Lord willing, we will be back tomorrow. So let us know what you want us to cover in the comments, and doesn't have to be just me and Anthony. We should, one night while you're here, see if we can get you, me, and Sam all on. You know what I mean? That might be interesting to try, because I have multiple cameras, so I could, in theory, have a camera at you and a camera at me, and then Sam on by Skype, and have us all 3 side by side. But I would have to test that. All right. Catch you all tomorrow.